Hello again and good afternoon, and thank you all for coming today to the session this afternoon, where we're joined from Nairobi, I think, by James, who's on the screen, another James who's not on the screen, and Mihal. So I'll just talk you through who they are. So we've got James Powell here, who is going to lead us through a conversation around how you go from a Warwick student out into a wonderful journey and back again through entrepreneurship as a key theme, and when you come out the other side as a founder, which is where James is on the screen. So James Powell is the Regional Enterprise Director for NatWest, covering Midlands, South West and Wales. The enterprise team supports hundreds of entrepreneurs to start and scale their businesses through various events, access to mentors, access to entrepreneur communities. James has a real passion for entrepreneurship, coaching, and reaching and supporting business strategy and personal development. Mihal is an innovation fellow here at the University of Warwick, and he's the co-founder of Advance Accelerator, a student-run social enterprise accelerator as part of the Enactus network. His extensive experience in the West Midlands startup ecosystem, and also works as an investment analyst for Creator Fund, the largest European VC fund that invests in student entrepreneurs. Mihal loves meeting and helping the next generation of student innovations. So please get in touch if you're interested in taking any of that further. And then on screen, we have James Powell. No, we don't. We have James Costa. You see, two Jameses. What were the chances of getting two Jameses, and how did I get to mix them up? So James Costa is the co-founder and COO at Fingo, a neobank for Africa's 500 million youth. Fingo recently graduated from Y Combinator and received backing in their seed round from a number of unicorn founders and global VCs. I'm going to leave James to give you the rest of his story, so I will hand over first of all to James Powell as host. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Welcome everybody to The Climb for our session today. And for those of us joining online, thank you as well. It'd be great to see you in person over the weeks and months ahead. So pleased to host this event today in person. And it's just a testament and a true hybrid to all the support that is available here at the University of Warwick. There's a number of organisations, and I'm sure you'll have the chance to meet them throughout the rest of the day. So as part of Global Entrepreneurship, we've opened up our spaces to share with you some of the successes, some of the entrepreneurs, some of the opportunities that are available for you as well. And I'm pleased to say and listen to, James, your story and your journey. If I can just cover a few housekeeping rules, first of all, is just that there should be no fire alarm planned for today. So if you do hear the alarm, it is a real one. So we make our way to the fire exits. Toilets at the back of the room as well if you do need them. And this session is being recorded. You'll see people taking photographs as well. So if you don't want to be on those, just please put your hand up or make your way to the back of the room. But it leaves me now to introduce to James. James, really interested to hear your story, your journey, all those highs and lows. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. I would love to share a little bit more about my journey, a story from Warwick student to entrepreneur to corporate and back to entrepreneur again, and maybe I'll share a couple of reflections as well. Since leaving Warwick. So right now today I run a digital bank in East Africa and hopefully in the future Africa, much like Monzo, or Revolut or something like that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. And before that, I was an engagement manager at McKinsey, where I worked on corporate business building. Before that, I was, not quite a failed entrepreneur, but not quite a successful entrepreneur either. So my first startup didn't particularly go anywhere. And then before that, again, I was a Warwick student. But for me, everything really starts to Warwick on my innovation and entrepreneurship journey from day one, at Freshers Fair, getting involved in a society and becoming a Freshers rep. And that gave me the confidence to then, run for an executive position in a society. And then I went on to set up another society called Warwick Kickstart, which is one of the entrepreneurship societies on campus. And then from there, I realized, well, if I can maybe set up a society, maybe I can set up a company. And I went to set up my first social enterprise called Mandala Group. But I really feel like Warwick is such a fantastic space to meet co-founders, to get involved in new projects. And I'm so excited you'll have this space in the innovation district to do exactly that. I wish I did when I was at Warwick, and I think it must be great to come back after the pandemic and be able to connect to each other's at the event today. And I wish I could be there in person. So at Warwick, I went on to do a year abroad, actually. So I studied economics at Warwick, and I did a year abroad in the middle at the University of Hong Kong. And, another great example of how I sound like a Warwick ambassador here, but I really am really thankful for everything Warwick has given me since. And spent a year in Hong Kong and ended up setting up a social enterprise, building mobile applications in rural India and rural Kenya, which is quite close to my own roots. I'm half British, half Indian, Kenyan, and I really wanted to do something with a social purpose. And so I actually started building applications on old mobile phones like your Nokia 3310 on text and voice to help people in rural communities access services. And we built a literacy application helping mothers read to their children for the first time in Mumbai. And then another tool in Kenya helping coconut farmers sell their coconuts. But I think the first time around, the thing I got wrong is, there was no real focus in my company. We were just doing projects, trying to solve a social issue, but we did have a problem to solve. But unfortunately, what I built and what I worked on didn't really have a commercial model of any kind. And so although we impacted a few hundred or a few thousand people, we weren't really able to continue working on it ourselves. And so I made the pivot to actually management consulting, and I ended up working at McKinsey because I realized I think to be successful in entrepreneurship, at least for me, I needed to harden my skills a little bit, kind of learn how to communicate, how to interact in the business world, and learn from other great, smart people. And so, but I knew I had this spark for entrepreneurship, and I knew I wanted to work on new projects, new ideas, technology, and also things with a social purpose. And so even at McKinsey, I really kind of wanted to get involved in corporate innovation. And unfortunately, that's exactly what I did. And simply by putting my hand up as a young graduate at the time, saying, I have experience as an entrepreneur, and I'd really, like to contribute to some of the projects with that McKinsey are working on with corporates. I got into corporate business building, which is really about, leveraging some of the great capabilities that, companies like NatWest have, of course, James, you'll know, but bringing that agility and speed that startups have. And I got to work with a lot of global energy companies and banks on transforming their customer experiences or using assets and capabilities that they have to build new businesses. And that I think I learned a lot about, corporate politics and how hard it can be to do things in corporates. But at the same time, how much large institutions, as an entrepreneur or as a partner to them, or even within them, you have all this capability or these assets to set up new companies or set up new initiatives, and that kind of really inspired me, and I ended up staying at McKinsey sort of 4 years or so because I enjoyed so much working with large sort of more legacy corporations and helping them find new life with new products and services and things like that. But ultimately, for me, there was nothing really like actually going out and being an entrepreneur if that is what you wanted to do. And so I was always hungry to set up my own company, I guess. And the opportunity sort of came along in the background. I was throwing a few ideas around with a Warwick alumni called Kiru, who studied PPE. I studied economics, and we just stayed in touch after leaving Warwick, after being involved in a couple of different projects together. We went to an Enactors hackathon together. I visited him socially in Kenya, and we just stayed friends actually, and that friendship, with shared interests, we kept bouncing ideas, and we sort of thought, having experienced Monzo at university, I don't know if many of you are Monzo users, but there's many examples of sort of fintech innovation in the UK. We realized that East Africa was really lacking in the same way. And so although we have a service called M-Pesa here, it's very expensive to send money in East Africa, upwards of 9% to send money to a friend, to a loved one, to a business. And we also realized that, as young people, we didn't really feel like any products and services were built for us on the continent, and we wanted to interact with products and services that actually represented us and relate to us. And then, of course, the fact that actually going to get an account was very difficult. And so, even today, actually, with a traditional bank in Kenya, you might go into a bank and you'll get an account 3 or 4 days later, but you might have to go in again and fill in paperwork. You might get declined. And when, the alternative is a 5-minute onboarding around the rest of the world, that's actually not acceptable. Right. And so we went about founding Fingo, which is a neobank for Africa's youth, solving exactly these problems, making fees 90 to 100% cheaper, building a product based on social interaction so people can, send money in a really intuitive way, just like WhatsApp. And that's mobile first. And so you simply scan your ID or your passport, you put in some information, and 5 minutes later you have a bank account. And all of that past experience, sort of both at Warwick setting up new things, gave me the confidence to go and do this, as well as that time at McKinsey working with corporates. I understood to some extent what it takes to kind of set up in the banking world, and actually it's very difficult to get licenses. And so we chose a partnership model, working with an existing bank actually to ride on their license to be able to launch, which essentially takes us to today, where we've just finished Y Combinator. We've been fortunate enough to raise $2 million in seed funding, and we're gearing up for launch hopefully in the next kind of coming months, and be really excited to share more about with all of you then. So that's kind of my story very briefly in a nutshell, and I'll keep it kind of short and sweet and open it up for questions before too long. But maybe just 3 reflections from me that I really want to share with kind of everyone here today, from the wider Warwick community as well as the students, from my journey as an entrepreneur twice and working as a management consultant. I think the first is really, you don't have to be doing a startup to be an entrepreneur. That's one thing I absolutely recognized at McKinsey, and even at Warwick, actually setting up a new initiative within a society, or just testing out an idea with a friend, or going to run a fundraising event. For me, entrepreneurship and innovation actually encapsulates all of these things. And so, as you all think about innovation today at Warwick, I'd really encourage you to kind of widen your definition. And I think all of the students in the room probably have a side hustle or a side initiative, or they're thinking about a side hustle or a side initiative. And for me, I would think about yourselves as an entrepreneur then, and you have this fantastic space, at Warwick to work with. And that applies again, as you leave Warwick, or, in your jobs, you can be an entrepreneur within your organization and act accordingly. The second is really take advantage of what you have around you. And, I think that's been the case to me. Actually, Warwick has been littered in everything that I've done since. It's the reason I ended up setting up my first social enterprise. It's the reason I went to McKinsey. At McKinsey, I connected with a lot of different Warwick alumni. And then it turns out someone I knew from university, we reconnected and set up a business together. And so anyone in this room could be your future co-founder or business partner or business connection. And you have such a group of smart, creative, passionate people all together in the same room. There's sort of with the resources of the university behind you, there's no limit to what you can what you can go and do in my view. And the third kind of thing I wanted to share is about, I guess some innovation again is something that I really took from Y Combinator this summer. And one of the things, that often gets floated around is 90% of companies die or startups die. And actually, when you look under that data, and this is true from Y Combinator's data as well, almost all of those companies that die, the reason they die is that people give up. And so, very, very rarely companies in the end, maybe they run out of money, but more likely, especially in the early stages, you give up before you have product market fit. And so if you are thinking of, setting up a project or initiative or even a company, and you're just getting started today, I think the key lesson, the single biggest thing, is if you keep knocking on enough doors, using this community and this, all the resources you have around you, and simply keep working on it for as long as it takes, most likely you will actually be successful, or more successful than many of those companies that go and die. So that's a little bit about my journey. I'm kind of so happy to be here today, and maybe we sort of switch over to questions, James, and happy to dive into any areas you'd like to learn more about.
Thank you very much, James. It was really interesting. I've made some notes as well in the 3 reflections. I totally agree and resonate with that whole mindset of being an entrepreneur. In the bank, we've coined the phrase of intrapreneur. So you don't have to have your business. You can innovate, and you can look, build, measure, learn is what we really preach with our colleagues as well as our entrepreneurs as well. I suppose the first question from me is, a lot of people, when they hear about the entrepreneurial journey, they hear about all the highs. What has been the biggest challenge, setback, or failure for you, and what did you learn as a result?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess maybe kind of two parts to this. The first is when I first did my first social enterprise, it maybe lacked a little bit of focus, but we were working on really important social issues to me, and eventually decided that the right thing for me is to not pursue entrepreneurship right now, or entrepreneurship in the form of starting a company, but actually go and learn from other people at McKinsey or any other large corporate, or even from another startup. And I used to think of myself as a failure because of that, because I couldn't get my company off the ground at 21, and I'd kind of split my time between so many little different projects and burn myself out in the process. But I think it comes back to this entrepreneurship. Number one, that failure today is a great data point and something that gives me confidence every single day to go out there and be an entrepreneur today. And so over the longer timeline, people often talk about fail fast, or failing is always learning. And failing is actually so incredibly painful at the time. I think that's the other thing that people don't talk about. But I learned to kind of change my mindset, and again, coming back to, you don't have to go and conquer the world now as you leave Warwick, but if you take away this mindset of being an entrepreneur in whatever you go and do, of taking initiative in a graduate job, or in a nonprofit, or in further academic research, I think that mindset is something that will stay constant and serve you very well, and help you go into calculated risky situations. So that's the first part. And I guess the second part, now being kind of more live, I guess taking a very focused, digital bank to market, it's sort of up and down every day. After Y Combinator, we're fortunate to have a lot of investor meetings, and the first 20 or 30 was straight no. And and then we got 1 yes. And then we got 2 yeses, and then we got 10 yeses. And so it's constantly, an up and down. The central bank says we can't launch this month, or we'll have to launch next month, but then we get other exciting news. And so entrepreneurship kind of on a day-to-day is more like a roller coaster for me, but, with a lot of my emotional sort of identity tied up in it too. But that first big failure, but I don't even look at it as a failure anymore, I guess, kind of anchors me. And also my experience at McKinsey actually helps me know that I do have some hard skills and some experience that I can lean on and say, okay, well, actually, I am approaching things in the right way. It's just not going right necessarily, but I'm going about things in the right way.
Great, James. I have a follow-up question as well, because just like you, I share a vision that a lot of the brightest ideas currently in the UK are being dreamed of in university campuses and laboratories around here. And one question that I always like to ask you, got support from Y Combinator, what role does incubation programs play, especially for a young founder trying to build something out, and the role of community specifically in that?
Yeah, for me, I've been a huge beneficiary of Y Combinator and a number of similar incubator programs before. But I think, especially when you're getting started the first time, entrepreneurship is a completely unstructured thing. And just that little bit of structure, a 12-week program or with a set of milestones that you can work towards can really help to focus your attention and energy into something. And so, I think through going through Y Combinator, it really accelerated the way we were working as a company. Unfortunately, we've been able to keep that momentum going afterwards. And so, its simplest accelerators often increase the pace that you're doing work or achieving things through connections or simply knowledge. And, you can keep that momentum going afterwards. And, again, I guess my most recent experience, Y Combinator, there's about 2,500 Y Combinator entrepreneurs now. There's an online forum. And so pretty much any question, anytime I get worried or anxious or, something I don't know about legal, I just go online and I ask the Y Combinator community or a friend in the same situation who's done it before. And the answers are already there. And so, again, at Warwick, you have this, you have the wider business community, you have people studying different courses. Pretty much the answer to any question you ever have can probably be answered by someone around you, and you can go and get those answers from them, as well as potentially simply, sit down and have a coffee or a beer or whatever else with people and, debrief about the hard or the great time that you're having. And so all of those things have just helped me going, I guess, with that kind of idea of just not giving up on the company or an innovation along the way.
Some of the best entrepreneurs I've met, James, in the 7 years I've been doing this, have surrounded themselves with smart people. Great entrepreneurs surround themselves with smart people, but they also surround themselves with what I call a personal boardroom. So those people who are, whether they be critical friends, honest opinions, and people who will tell you the truth but challenge your way of thinking. So on your journey, where did you find that personal boardroom, those people who you could turn to for asking for an honest opinion? And do you stay in contact with them now still?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a great example of this recently is, I chose to leave, a high paying job in London with security and, everything else, to move to Nairobi and, start a bank from scratch. And so, in terms of risk profile and all sorts of different things, it was a very big decision. Also, to make my life and change what I'm doing. And I think, I guess my personal sort of board of directors along the way have been, they've come from all sorts of different places. From my times at Warwick, from mentors or managers or various other people at McKinsey, and just other people I've just met or listened to a talk and ended up building a relationship. And I guess how I found those people is I've often come across people that are a little bit further ahead of me in a certain aspect or a certain way, and essentially it comes down to, wow, I'd kind of really like to be like that person. And it turns out we get on. If it turns out we get on as well, I think that's a great way to start to build a relationship. And very often, if you bring people who've been through similar experiences or problems or issues or things you want to talk about, that's a great way to reinforce a relationship. And so, lots of these, my mentors through time, I brought this problem of, do I stay in the corporate world or do I go back to entrepreneurship? And I got all sorts of different views, but actually a lot of people sort of were really supportive of the idea of me going. And so then, kind of collecting those different views and also getting views of people saying, no, what are you doing? You should stay in London. It helped to really reinforce what I actually wanted to do. So I guess I've sort of acquired them along the way, and probably for many of you, maybe even one or two of them are in this room right now.
Perfect, James. Another question from my side is, I want to take you back to your Kickstart days when you were a student entrepreneur. And a lot of the times it can be a roller coaster ride. And what I particularly notice a lot at Warwick is a lot of students sometimes struggle to validate if the idea has the potential to keep working on. So as a student with limited resources, how would you advise them to understand if the idea has got potential, and how do they go about establishing that product market fit and validating it at a small scale?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the first half of Y Combinator, they absolutely drill us in, is the first and simple most thing is basically write code and talk to customers. And so if you're not, and writing code, you don't have to be writing code. You could simply put together a very simple MVP of what you're doing, or day one, you could talk about, the one thing you have at Warwick, you might not have money to build things or pursue anything yet, but you have people. And you also have time. And so what are your assets? People and time. Go and ask your friends around you, your housemates. You could, grab a Google form and go to the piazza and simply ask people if they're interested in your idea and collect that data to really test your early, the build, measure, learn James was talking about, test your early hypothesis. Actually, I remember at Warwick, me and a friend were exploring WeChat, which is a messaging and also payment service in China, and we thought it'd be interesting if that would work in Warwick. And so we went to Costa Coffee at the time. I think it's Prep now, and we stood in Costa Coffee all day with WeChat signs, talking to international students and paying for their coffee with WeChat, and asking them if they would rather pay this way, and collecting the money from them in that way. And actually, we seemed to got a bit of traction, but it was too technically hard for us at the time to really pursue and integrate, or our skills didn't match to what was needed for that business. But I think that's a great example of, you have lots of people on campus that are probably going to give you time. Go, probably the easiest and quickest audience you can serve is build for students, and see if they're interested.
So I think we'll come to some questions in a moment. So those in the room and those online, if you've got any questions, please either put your hand up or online if you put them through on the Q&A button. We'll come to those questions as well. Last one in the room from me, James, is what part did your degree play in your journey as an entrepreneur? How did it prepare you?
You might not like this answer. Personally, I think the most special thing about Warwick, and I actually think it's quite a special university, it's the campus, plus the smart people, plus all the societies and sports. And so my degree was, important, and I really enjoyed studying economics. And I think it gave me an analytical mindset, and the ability to problem solve, which is useful in every context. But the single biggest thing I got from Warwick is actually all those small opportunities I was talking about to build my confidence, to learn skills, to interact and work in a team, basically, and then even eventually lead teams of different things at Warwick. And it was all available on campus, right? And so, the degree was important, but I think the great people that I met and the opportunities I had in such a small space on the campus was the best thing about Warwick.
Got any online? Any questions online? No? Anybody in the room? Got a question? Yeah. Thanks, James.
Hi, James. Tony Carroll speaking. I'm a graduate of Warwick University as well with economics, and listening to what you've just said there, Forming a bank in Africa, forming a bank anywhere, when you actually said it, I sort of shifted on my seat because I thought that sounds a really scary thing to do. So, from a legalistic, bureaucratic point of view, compliance, regulation, all of that seems to be needing a lot more detail and in-depth conversations beyond a chat in Costa Coffee. So can you give us a little bit on that, what that was about?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess that, comes back to actually to build the business I'm doing today, I had to have that first entrepreneurship experience and that corporate experience. And essentially, my time at McKinsey helped me understand how banks work. And so, as a co-founding team, we've been able to build the front end and a really good mobile application for young people that we understand really well. But of course, compliance, fraud, financial crime, regulation is not necessarily our strength as a startup today. And so we partnered with the biggest footprint bank in Africa to actually provide that regulatory air cover for us to launch and expand in different markets. And so we're the front end and they're the back end, and together we have a partnership that basically enables us to launch. And I guess, something that I didn't talk about, but I think that's another great thing about the Innovation District is partnership, the combination of student energy, skills, time with, the corporations can be a great formula to build a company.
Any more questions in the room? Anybody upstairs?
Well, James, I'm going to ask one final question from my side. Is that what do you miss the most about university and the startup culture at university? Because I can imagine moving to McKinsey and working in a very corporate hostile environment. It's a very different feel. What is the transition like going from campus presence to a big multinational company like McKinsey and then right after that starting your own business?
Yeah, I think the great thing about going to a global university like Warwick is a lot of the folks from Warwick then go down to London or stay in of friends and connections in all sorts of different companies across London. When I moved there, I grew up in Sheffield actually, so I'm a kind of actually really fan of regional development in the UK, and think Birmingham, Warwick, Sheffield miss out, on some of the top talent, and I want to see that change over time, which is why I'm so excited about the Innovation District. But it ultimately comes back to the community. You have all these students on campus, your friends, colleagues in different initiatives, and you're all kind of put together in this small space that you get to see them every single day in courses or working on different things. And of course, you keep that up online and you stay in touch. But I think it's the Warwick campus that I miss.
Hey, good afternoon. Working? Hello? It is working. Hi,
Yes.
My name's Tanya. I'm an MBA student here. I have two questions if there's time. So the first question is, and excuse my ignorance, I haven't done the research on the topic, but you mentioned Revolut and Monzo. So what are you going to do if these fintechs come to Nairobi in Africa? What's your competitive advantage? And then the second question is, why the physical move to Nairobi? Were you kind of fed up with London, fed up with the rain? Did you need to do business on the ground in Nairobi? What was like? Could you have set this up remotely? So why the physical move to Nairobi? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So on the first question in terms of competition, I think actually. To the question earlier, Africa can be a complex market because it's not as far ahead in terms of regulation, fraud, financial crime, data ecosystems, and so that makes it that bit harder to launch here. And so we don't necessarily see fintechs like Monzo, Revolut coming to East Africa anytime soon. It's also an incredibly regulated market in East Africa and specifically Kenya. And there hasn't been a core banking license in the last 10 or 15 years, which is why we took a partnership approach to partner with an existing bank to be able to launch. And then as a team, we think we really understand very well young Africans. My three co-founders, one of which Kiru studied at Warwick, are Kenyan, and I'm half Indian Kenyan. And so we understand the needs and the dynamics of this market and what young people want. And we think, it will ultimately be a game of speed. And so we're the first ones here right now. And so our job is now to launch as quickly as possible and beat anyone else coming. And then the second point, we're actually a remote first company. And so we're 10 people today and we don't have an office. But again, when you're doing a financial institution, it really helps to be in the country that you're launching in. But we do have, employees and even co-founders that work from the UK or work from different places in the world. But we have to balance that with sometimes being here for regulatory purposes.
I have a question, if that's okay. I'm really intrigued by the corporate life versus entrepreneur discussion. So if you were to say what the best bit of being in a corporate and the worst bit, and whether those are compensated by being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, definitely. I guess with, being a corporate, you have job stability. I think depending on where you are in your career, there's a massive opportunity to learn particular skills, learn from great mentors, and I guess do that in a very safe and structured environment. I think with a lot of sort of different graduate programs. The downside is, and it depends what sort of career you're in, but maybe that learning curve stops after some time, or maybe more likely that the organization has reached a size that it simply can't move at the speed that a very small company can. And so for me individually, that speed of learning, but also doing things is really, really important. And that was both the upside and the downside. Entrepreneurship is, I love the freedom that it gives you to work in a small company, to own, a small part of that company, and in terms of like what is getting done or how it's getting done, and just make decisions quickly and really learn from those decisions, for better or worse. We're going to run these advertisements, where we're going to spend money on this, we're going to hire these people, and half the time it doesn't work out, and you learn quickly and you adjust. And I really, really enjoy that freedom. Also, I guess another great thing is I found I can design my day in the way I want to. So unfortunately, when I was in the corporate life, I didn't make it to the gym as much as I'd like to. But the strange thing is, when I go to the gym, I'm twice as productive. And so that freedom to design your day and work in ways which I think a lot of corporates are now trying to design in to their proposition. That's a great side of working for a small company. The downside, I guess, is risk, and it's challenging. But where I am today, I really enjoyed that challenge.
Oh, the front.
Hello, I'm Edward. I study engineering and a master's. And I'm just curious about you saying about learn experience. I understand it's the entrepreneur experience, but are you learning as well how to code, app develop, or how to, as it's related to your business, you want to know everything, a bit of everything. Have you, I don't know, enhanced the course in app development or have you just outsourced that, or
Yeah, it's a great question. And the question before, what did you learn most from your degree? I think something like engineering or computer science, you maybe take, potentially can be more or less helpful to whatever career you do. For me in our company, we have a CTO and, 5 developers. And so they build the code much better than and own, the technology much better than I ever would. But I think when you're running a company, it is important to understand what's going on. And so I've done a couple of short courses on Coursera, as well as, working at McKinsey, I had the chance to understand, I guess, technical architecture and how banks fit together. And so I understand it at that level. But also, being in a small company, it's about trust. And so if everyone was spending all their time worrying about the code or all their time worrying about kind of someone else's area of the business, you wouldn't move the speed you need to. And so it's sort of trust and balance as well. Yeah.
No more questions? Well, thank you so much, James, for giving up your time. I know you're probably extremely busy getting ready for launch, but I think a big round of applause for James for sharing his story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.